Admiral Tay's eyes reflected the distant stars as he stood silently at the viewport of the Resilience. The massive generation ship had been his home for all 53 years of his life, just as it had been for his parents and grandparents before him. 2 centuries had passed since humanity had been driven to the edge of extinction by the Exiled Collective, a merciless alien empire that had systematically hunted down and destroyed human colonies across the galaxy. The last remnants of humanity had flowed into the unknown regions of space, beyond the reach of Silurian scanners. Only 12 ships had escaped the fall of Earth. 12 ships carrying barely 10,000 survivors of a civilization that had once numbered in billions. Tay's hand unconsciously moved to touch the small vial hanging from his neck. Inside was a tiny amount of soil, actual Earth soil, that had been passed down through his family. He had never seen his ancestral homeworld except in recordings and simulations. Sometimes it felt like nothing more than a story told to children. The soft hiss of the command deck door interrupted his thoughts. Commander June approached with a data tablet in hand, his usually calm face showing signs of tension. "Admiral, we're receiving the data from the reconnaissance drones," June reported. Tay turned from the viewport, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the ship's lighting. "And?" June's jaw tightened as he handed over the tablet. "The Exilarians continue to expand their territory. They've established outposts in the Cygnus sector using modified human technology." His voice dropped lower, anger barely contained. "They celebrate the anniversary of Earth's fall as a holiday." Tay took the tablet, scrolling through images of Silurian outposts built with technology clearly derived from human designs. The sight made his stomach knot. The aliens hadn't just tried to wipe out humanity. They had stolen their innovations, their creativity, their legacy. "Show me the population estimates," Tay ordered. June tapped the screen, bringing up a series of charts. The Exiled Collective has nearly tripled in size since the war. They've subjugated at least 7 other species and stripped resources from dozens of worlds. Far across the galaxy, High Commander Dohan of the Exiled Collective stood before his war council in a vast chamber carved from a single massive crystal. The senior military leaders of their species sat in tiered rows, their scaled skin reflecting the ambient light. "It has been 2 centuries since we eliminated the human threat," Dohan announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. He moved his 4 arms in the ceremonial pattern that signified triumph. Their rapid expansion and unpredictable nature posed too great a risk to galactic stability. Sub-Commander Rhea, his most trusted advisor, nodded in agreement. Her facial ridges flared with pride. Their extinction was necessary. They were primitive but dangerously adaptable. The council members clicked their mandibles in the traditional sign of agreement. None questioned the official history they had all been taught since hatching, that humans had been a violent, expansionist species whose unchecked growth would have threatened all other life in the galaxy. None suspected that humanity had not been extinguished, but had been rebuilding in secret. The scattered fleet that had escaped Earth's destruction had grown from 12 desperate ships to over 300. Multiple generations had been born in space, never knowing Earth but raised on stories of their lost homeworld and the promise of eventual return. Back on the Resilience, Admiral Tay called a meeting of his senior staff. They gathered in the Strategic Command Center, a circular room at the heart of the massive ship. The walls displayed star maps and tactical readouts, the accumulated intelligence from 2 centuries of patient observation. Commander Jin, head of engineering, pointed to a section of the display showing Silurian defense systems. Their shields still used the same frequency modulation patterns they stole from our Jupiter defense platforms. They've refined the technology, but never fundamentally changed it. They grew complacent, added Commander Bin, the fleet's chief tactical officer. Her eyes gleamed as she manipulated the display to show simulation results. "Our phase shift technology will let us bypass their defensive perimeters entirely." Tay studied the assembled officers, all born in space, all raised with the memory of a lost civilization. None had ever walked on a planet's surface or felt natural gravity, yet they had preserved humanity's knowledge and advanced it beyond what had existed before the fall. The Exilarians believe they wrote the final chapter of human history, Ta said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. They celebrate our extinction, while using the very technology they stole from us. He moved to the center of the room, where a holographic display showed Earth as it had once been: blue waters, white clouds, green and brown landmasses. The image shifted to show Earth as it was now, a fractured, lifeless husk, its atmosphere stripped away, its surface scored by Exilarian weapons. For 200 years, we have hidden. For 200 years, we have rebuilt. For 200 years, we have remembered. Ta looked at each officer in turn. The waiting is over. The room fell silent. This was the moment generations had prepared for, the return of humanity to a galaxy that thought them extinct. Commander Hannah, the youngest senior officer, spoke up. The strike teams are ready, Admiral. The stealth modifications to the forward fleet have been completed. And the message? Tai asked. Hannah activated a simple text display. Humanity, or EMBRs. A grim smile of approval passed across Ta's face. Prepare the fleet. Our first target will be their outpost in the Proxima system. We'll leave one survivor to carry our message. As the meeting ended, Tai returned to the viewport. Behind the Resilience, hundreds of ships moved into formation, a fleet born in exile, crewed by people who had never known a home beyond their vessels. Yet they carried with them the collective memory and determination of a species that refused to fade into extinction. In the command center of the Resilience, Admiral Ta reviewed the final preparations for humanity's return. The tactical displays showed all systems ready, all ships in position. 200 years of planning, building, and waiting had led to this moment. The waiting is over, he announced to his officers, his voice steady with the weight of history. It's time to remind the galaxy that humanity is not so easily erased from history. As the order to move out was given, the vast human fleet began to shift from their hidden pocket of space. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was emerging from the shadows, not as refugees, but as an armada intent on reclaiming their place among the stars. The Exilarians thought they had written humanity's ending. They were about to discover they had merely set the stage for humanity's return. Commander Hannah stood before the 3-dimensional star map in the Tactical Operations Center of the Resilience. Her fingers moved quickly through the holographic display, zooming in on a small outpost on the 4th planet of the Proxima system. At 34, she was young for her position, but her brilliance in strategic planning had earned her the respect of officers twice her age. Unlike Admiral Tai, Hannah had no family heirlooms from Earth. Her ancestors had been researchers on Europa when the Exilarian attacks began. They had escaped with nothing but the clothes they wore and whatever data they could download in the precious minutes before evacuation. Computer, display Exilarian patrol patterns for Proxima sector, she commanded. The display shifted, showing the movement of enemy ships, predictable routes that had remained largely unchanged for decades. The Exilarians had grown comfortable in their dominance, their military practices becoming rigid and ceremonial rather than tactical. The door slid open, and Admiral Tai entered with Commander Jun at his side. Both men wore the dark blue uniforms of the Human Alliance Navy, simple in design but bearing the ancient symbol of Earth, a blue and green circle that few living humans had ever seen in person. Commander Hannah, Tai acknowledged with a nod. Show us what you've developed. Hannah gestured at the display. The outpost on Proxima IV is isolated enough for our purposes, she explained. Their communication relays are vulnerable. We strike hard, we strike fast, and we leave one survivor. One survivor? Questioned Jun, his brow furrowing. Why take the risk? To deliver our message, Hannah replied coldly. Humanity remembers. She touched another control, and the display shifted to show the approach vectors for the attack. 5 ships would participate, a small force, but equipped with technology that had advanced far beyond what the Exilarians had stolen centuries ago. Our phase shift drives will allow us to appear directly in orbit, she continued. The outpost's defenses are designed to track incoming ships from at least 2 light minutes out. They won't have time to raise shields or launch fighters. Tai studied the plan silently, his experienced eyes catching details that others might miss. And the survivor? How do we ensure they deliver our message? Hana smiled thinly. We've studied Exilarian psychology for generations. Admiral, they fear shame more than death. Being the sole survivor of a battle is the greatest dishonor in their culture. The survivor will deliver our message if only to explain their continued existence. 3 days later, the attack force departed from the hidden human fleet. The ships moved silently through space, their advanced drives leaving no ion trail for Exilarian sensors to detect. Captain Wong commanded the lead vessel, the Shadow of Earth, with Hana aboard as tactical coordinator. Phase shift drives charged and ready, reported the navigation officer. Coordinates for Proxima IV locked. Wong nodded. All ships, activate phase shift on my mark. He glanced at Hana, who stood calmly beside him. 3, 2, 1, mark. The universe seemed to ripple around them as the 5 ships shifted partially out of normal space. The stars blurred, and for 17 seconds, the crews experienced the strange disorientation of phase shift travel. Then suddenly, they were there, appearing in perfect formation directly above the Exilarian outpost. Deploy weapons, all ships, commence attack. Wong ordered. The outpost below them was a sprawling facility built into the rust-colored landscape of Proxima IV. Exilarian architecture favored crystalline structures that caught and refracted light. Beautiful, but easily targeted. The attack was flawless. Advanced human ships with cloaking technology that the Exilarians couldn't comprehend unleashed precision strikes against defense systems, communication arrays, and power generators. The Exilarians scrambled to respond, but their reaction was too slow, too confused. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. When it was over, the outpost lay in ruins, with only one structure deliberately left intact, the command center. Boarding party reports they have secured the target, a communications officer informed Hana. She nodded. Bring them up. Shortly thereafter, a single Exilarian officer was escorted onto the bridge. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, its scaled skin glistening under the ship's lights, its 4 arms bound behind its back. Despite its captivity, the Exilarian maintained the rigid posture of its military caste. You understand our language? Hana asked. The Exilarian's facial ridges flexed in what humans had learned was an affirmative gesture. I am Subcommander Tal of the Exilarian Collective, it stated. I demand to know the identity of my captors. Hana stepped closer, looking up at the creature from a species that had nearly wiped out her own. We are what you tried to erase from history, she said simply. Humans. The Exilarian's compound eyes widened, its breathing quickened. Impossible. The human species was cleansed from the galaxy 2 centuries ago. Clearly not, Hana replied. And now you will deliver a message for us. The alien was placed in an escape pod with a data crystal containing a simple message before being launched toward the nearest Exilarian space station. The pod systems were programmed to prevent self-destruction. The Exilarian would have to live with the shame of survival. 3 days later, in the Grand Crystal Chamber of the Exilarian High Command, High Commander Dohan watched the footage recovered from the escape pod. The images showed ships bearing the ancient symbol of Earth appearing from nowhere, destroying a military outpost with frightening efficiency. His normally composed demeanor cracked. Impossible, he whispered. They were eradicated. We were thorough. The central display showed the simple message that had been included with the footage. Humanity or emit MBRs. Sub-Commander Raya stood beside him, her usual confidence shaken. The humans have returned, she stated, unable to mask her fear. And they've advanced far beyond our expectations. How many survived our purge? Dohun demanded, turning to his intelligence officers. How did they hide for 2 centuries? Where have they been? None had answers. The Exilarian military had maintained for generations that humanity's extinction was complete. Now that certainty, that complacency, threatened to unravel their empire's security. Alert all outposts, Dohun ordered. Increase patrols in all sectors. Reactivate the dormant defense systems. The humans must be found and destroyed. This time, without exception. Across the chamber, an elder Exilarian commander named Varl watched silently. Unlike his peers, he had studied the ancient records of the human war extensively. High Commander, he ventured, perhaps we should consider what they want. Want? Dohun's voice rose in anger. They want vengeance, obviously. Yes, Varl agreed, but why announce their return? Why not simply strike without warning until we were crippled? They revealed themselves intentionally. Before Dohun could respond, the chamber lights flickered, and the displays changed. Somehow, the humans had accessed the Exilarian communication network. On every screen in the chamber, and they would later learn, on every Exilarian world, the same message appeared. Humanity, or min MBRs. Back on the Resilience, Admiral Tai addressed the assembled crews of the human fleet. Thousands watched in person while millions more viewed the transmission throughout the 300 ships that comprised humanity's armada. The first blow has been struck, he announced, his voice steady and strong. We have awakened from the long night of our exile. The Exilarians believed they wrote the final chapter of humanity's story. They were wrong. A cheer rose from the crowd, 2 centuries of waiting finally giving way to action. Commander Hannah stood at attention beside the Admiral, her face revealing none of the emotions swirling within her. The plan had succeeded perfectly, yet this was just the beginning. For generations, we have prepared for this moment, Ta continued. Our ancestors preserved not just our genetic heritage, but our cultural and ethical foundations as well. We return to the galactic stage, not as conquerors, but as survivors seeking justice. He paused, looking out at the faces of people born in space, raised on ships, yet carrying within them the indomitable spirit of Earth. The Exilarians will now know fear, he said. The fear of an enemy they cannot see until it is too late. The fear of an enemy who knows their weaknesses. The fear of an enemy they thought they had destroyed, but who instead grew stronger in the darkness. As the fleet prepared for its next strike, Hannah returned to her quarters. On her small desk sat a plant in a sealed container, a descendant of the last roses to leave Earth. She touched the container gently, remembering the stories her grandmother had told her of gardens and forests and oceans. We remember, she whispered to the flower. And now, they know we do. They call us ghosts, said Commander Hannah, reviewing intelligence reports in the dimly lit tactical room of the Resilience. 6 months had passed since their first strike against the Exilarian outpost on Proxima IV. Her fingers moved quickly over the data screens, sorting through intercepted Exilarian communications. Their military is in disarray. Admiral Ta nodded, studying the star map that showed their recent attack patterns. Operation Shadow had been in effect for 6 months now. Human ships would appear using their phase shift technology, strike critical Exilarian targets, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Each attack left the same message: humanity remembers. The psychological impact has been even greater than we anticipated, Tai observed. Their command structure is breaking down. Ship captains are refusing to patrol certain sectors. Some outposts have been abandoned without orders. Captain Wong, who had led many of the shadow strikes, smiled grimly. Fear is a powerful weapon when your enemy believes themselves invincible. We've shattered their sense of security. Hannah pulled up footage from their most recent operation, the liberation of a mining colony on Rigel. The Exilarians had enslaved the native population, forcing them to extract valuable minerals in dangerous conditions. The human fleet had not only destroyed the Exilarian oversight facility, but had also provided the natives with weapons and supplies. Our actions are having ripple effects throughout the sector, Hannah reported. Other subjugated species are beginning to resist Solarian control. They see our attacks as proof the collective isn't invincible. Admiral Ta had expanded their strategy beyond mere hit-and-run attacks. We've made contact with the Novan Confederation, he announced to his senior staff. Like us, they'd suffered under Solarian expansion. The Novans were a loose collective of 7 different species who had been conquered by the Exilarians over the past century. Unlike humans, they hadn't been marked for extinction, but instead were forced into servitude, their worlds stripped of resources to fuel the collective's endless expansion. The first diplomatic meeting took place in neutral space, a small, uninhabited moon orbiting a gas giant. The human delegation consisted of Admiral Tai, Commander Hana, and Dr. Jun, their chief xenobiologist. They waited in a prefabricated structure, surrounded by security measures that would allow them to escape if the meeting proved to be a trap. When the Novan shuttle landed, 3 beings emerged. The lead figure was clearly female, tall and slender with iridescent skin that shifted colors with her movements, a characteristic of the Luma species. Behind her came 2 guards of different species, both heavily armed. I am Director Mina of the Novan Confederation, the Luma announced, her voice musical but wary. For many cycles, we believed humans were extinct, as the Solarians claimed. Your return has created opportunities. Their discussion lasted hours. The Novans shared valuable intelligence about Solarian defenses and supply lines. The humans offered their advanced technology and tactical expertise. But beneath the practical exchange lay deeper questions. How do we know you won't become like the Exilarians once you've had your revenge? Director Minna asked Admiral Ta directly, her skin flushing red with concern. Power corrupts, even those with good intentions. Tay's weathered face remained calm, but his eyes reflected centuries of loss. Because we remember what it's like to lose everything, he answered simply. We don't seek domination. We seek justice and a home. Mina studied him for a long moment before responding. Words are easy, Admiral. Actions reveal truth. We will watch your conduct in this war carefully before committing our forces to yours. Fair enough, Ta nodded. Join us first as observers. See how we treat those we liberate. Then decide. Meanwhile, on the Exilarian homeworld of Silara Prime, High Commander Doan had summoned his officers to an emergency council. The chamber was no longer the orderly, ceremonial space it had once been. Maps and tactical displays covered the crystal walls, and the officers spoke in urgent, often heated tones. 6 months of humiliation. Dohan rage. 6 months of these human ghosts striking where they please. How have we failed to capture even one of their ships? The assembled commanders shifted uncomfortably. None wanted to admit their inability to counter the human attacks. Dohan had assigned his most capable officer, Commander Su, to hunt down the human ghosts. Su was different from most Solarian military leaders. She had risen through the ranks based on merit rather than family connections, and her analytical mind approached problems differently. Report, Commander Su, Dohan ordered. Have you made any progress? Su stepped forward, her posture perfect but her facial ridges flat, a sign of deep thought rather than the traditional display of confidence. They're using some form of phase shift technology, Su reported, activating a holographic display. They can move through space in ways our sensors can't detect. And they're not just striking military targets, they're liberating our labor planets. The display showed footage from a dozen different attacks. In each case, human ships appeared without warning, struck with precision, and vanished before Solarian reinforcements could arrive. Most troubling is their apparent knowledge of our systems, Su continued. They know exactly where to strike to disable our defenses. They understand our communication protocols. They even seem to anticipate our patrol patterns. Dohan slammed his fist on the table. Find them. Use whatever resources necessary. After the meeting, Su returned to her private research facility. Unlike other commanders who sought to locate the human fleet through conventional means, Sue had been studying the historical records of the original human war. Something about the official narrative had always bothered her. The archives were housed in a vast underground complex beneath the military headquarters. Few Exilarians ever visited this place, preferring to rely on the summaries provided in their education. Commander Sue greeted the ancient archivist, a Exilarian so old his scales had faded to pale white. "Few of your rank show interest in history. I need to understand my enemy," Sue replied. "The humans survived our attempted extinction. I want to know why they were targeted in the first place." The archivist's compound eyes blinked slowly. "Those records are restricted. I have the High Commander's authorization," Sue countered, displaying her security credentials. It wasn't exactly a lie. Dohun had given her authority to access any information that might help defeat the humans. He simply hadn't expected her to look here. The archivist hesitated before leading her to a secure room deep within the archives. "The complete records of the human war are stored here, including the original council debates." Sue spent hours reviewing the actual historical documents rather than the sanitized versions taught to all Exilarians. What she found disturbed her deeply. The humans had not been the aggressive expansionists described in official history. Their colonies had been peaceful, their first contacts with alien species marked by caution and diplomacy. The decision to eradicate them had come not from any direct threat they posed, but from a small faction of Exilarian leadership who feared human adaptability and creativity. "Humanity represents an evolutionary competitor," one ancient recording stated. "Their rate of technological advancement outpaces ours by a factor of 3. Within a century, they could surpass us. Prevention requires elimination." Sue sat back, her mind racing. The entire justification for the war, for the attempted genocide of an entire species, had been based not on human aggression, but on fear of human potential. Why were the humans hunted to extinction in the first place? She asked the archivist directly. The old Exilarian seemed to age further before her eyes. "You have seen the truth. The question now is what you will do with it." Sue left the archives with the weight of history pressing down on her. The humans weren't attacking randomly. They were systematically liberating other species, forming alliances, rebuilding what the Exilarians had destroyed. Their message, "Humanity remembers," took on new meaning. They remembered not just what was done to them, but who they had been before. A species reached out to others, not to conquer but to connect. As Commander Sue prepared her official report for High Commander Dovan, she faced a moral crisis unlike any in her career. Should she tell the truth about why the humans had been targeted? Would it make any difference now, after centuries of hatred had built on both sides? She decided to include a small section of her findings, testing the waters. "The original conflict may have been based on incomplete intelligence," she wrote carefully. "Current human behavior suggests their primary motivation is survival and justice, not conquest." When Dohan read this section, his facial ridges flared in anger. "Commander Sue, are you suggesting our ancestors were wrong to eliminate the human threat?" "I'm suggesting we properly understand our enemy's motivations," Sue replied steadily. "If we know what they truly want, we might find a way to end this conflict." "They want vengeance," Dohan snapped. "And I want them destroyed. Focus on finding their fleet, not questioning our history." As Sue left the commander's chamber, she wondered if the Exilarian collective had made an enemy it could not defeat, not because the humans were more powerful, but because they fought with the moral clarity that comes from being the victims of an unjust war. For the first time in her life, Commander Sue began to question whether she was on the right side of history. The human-Novan alliance had changed the war completely. For 9 months now, combined fleets struck deep into Exilarian territory, liberating planets and destroying shipyards. What had begun as quick hit-and-run attacks had evolved into a full-scale liberation campaign. Admiral Taz stood on the bridge of the flagship Vindication, watching as another Exilarian battle group raised the white surrender signal. The massive view screen showed Silurian cruisers powering down their weapon systems as human and Novan ships surrounded them. "That's the third fleet to surrender this month," commented Captain Wong, satisfaction evident in his voice. Their will to fight is breaking. Ta nodded but remained thoughtful. Victory had come more swiftly than anyone had anticipated. The Silurians had grown complacent during their centuries of unchallenged dominance. Their military, once the terror of the galaxy, now seemed rigid and unable to adapt to human tactics. Commander June approached with a data tablet. "Admiral, I have good news. We've established a permanent colony on Terra Nova," he reported. "The first human world in 2 centuries. A murmur of excitement passed through the bridge crew. Terra Nova was a planet remarkably similar to Earth, located in a system far from Silurian supply lines. For the first time since the fall of Earth, humans were putting down roots on a world rather than living on ships. "How many colonists?" Tai asked. 5,000 to start," Jun replied. "Mostly families with children and agricultural specialists. The terraforming teams report the soil is highly compatible with Earth crops." Tai allowed himself a small smile. This was what they had fought for, not just vengeance, but a future for humanity, a home. Yet the tide of victory brought difficult questions. Later that day, Commander Hannah requested an urgent meeting with the senior staff. Her face was grim as she activated a secure holographic display in the conference room. "We've captured vital intelligence from a Silurian research facility," she explained. "The Exilarians are developing a super weapon capable of destroying entire star systems. They're calling it the final solution." The room fell silent as Hannah displayed the technical specifications. The weapon used artificially induced solar flares to destroy all planets in a star system simultaneously. "They're desperate," Dr. Jun commented. "This weapon would kill billions, including many of their own subject peoples." "How close are they to completion?" Tai asked. "Too close," Hannah replied. "The main facility is located deep within Silurian space, heavily guarded. We're still trying to determine its exact location." While the human-Novan alliance planned their response, a crisis was unfolding on the Silurian homeworld. Commander Sue stood before the High Command, her posture straight but her future uncertain. For weeks, she had secretly accessed restricted historical archives, compiling evidence that contradicted everything Silurians believed about their war against humanity. "The historical records have been altered," she stated boldly to High Commander Dovan and the assembled military leadership. "Humans weren't a threat to galactic stability. They were targeted because our leaders feared their potential. The war was based on a lie." Sue activated a display showing original council recordings from 2 centuries ago, recordings that few living Silurians had ever seen. "Our ancestors didn't attack humans because they were aggressive," she continued. "They attacked because humans were advancing too quickly. The decision to eradicate them came from fear, not self-defense." Dohan's facial ridges darkened with anger. "Commander Sue, you go too far. These archives are classified for good reason. Because they reveal the truth," Sue challenged. "Your sympathy for the enemy borders on treason, Commander," Dohan snapped. Sue looked around at the other council members, hoping to see some sign of doubt or concern. Instead, she saw only hardened expressions or averted gazes. "Is it treason to seek truth?" Sue challenged. "Is it treason to question whether genocide was justified?" "Guards," Dohan ordered, "arrest Commander Sue for treason and unauthorized access to classified materials." Sue did not resist as the guards took her arms. She had known this might happen when she chose to speak out. What she hadn't anticipated was how completely her evidence would be dismissed. They placed her in a high-security cell deep beneath the military headquarters. For 3 days, she saw no one except the guard who brought her meals. Sue used the time to reflect on everything she had learned about human history, about her own people's choices, about the nature of truth and loyalty. On the 4th night, something strange happened. The lights in her cell flickered briefly, and then the force field deactivated. Sue remained cautious, suspecting a test of her loyalty. A hooded figure appeared in the doorway, face concealed by shadow. "Commander Sue," the figure said softly. "We don't have much time." "Who are you?" Sue demanded, remaining where she was. The figure pulled back the hood, revealing a face Sue had never seen in person but recognized immediately from intelligence briefings. A human face. "Commander Hannah of the human fleet. How did you get in here?" Sue demanded, her compound eyes widening in shock. The Exilarian capital world was supposed to be impenetrable. "This is the most secure facility on Xilera Prime. The same way we've been outmaneuvering your fleets," Hannah replied, her expression serious. "Phase shift technology lets us move through spaces your sensors can't detect." She glanced at a small device on her wrist. "We need your help to prevent mass destruction. Your leaders are planning to use the final solution." Sue felt cold dread spread through her body. "The solar flare weapon. It's operational." "Nearly," Hannah confirmed. "We know it exists, but we don't know where the main control facility is located. Time is running out." Sue considered her options quickly. Her loyalty to her people ran deep, but she had seen the evidence of their leaders' willingness to commit genocide. First against humans, now potentially against any world that supported the Human-Novan Alliance. "Why should I help you?" Sue asked, though her mind was already made up. "You've killed thousands of my people." "We've tried to minimize casualties," Hannah replied. "Check our attack patterns. We target military installations, not civilian centers. We disable ships when possible rather than destroying them." She paused. "You found the truth in your archives. You know what started this war. Now you need to decide if you'll let history repeat itself." Sue made her choice. "What do you need me to do?" "First, get us out of here," Hannah said. "Then help us locate the final solution control center." Sue nodded and followed Hannah into the corridor. Two more humans waited there, wearing adaptive camouflage suits that bent light around them. "The facility is on Xilera IV," Sue explained as they moved through the shadows. "The third moon. It's disguised as a scientific research station, but it houses the control mechanisms for the weapon." "Security?" one of the other humans asked. "Extensive," Sue replied. "But I have access codes, or I did before my arrest." They reached a small maintenance area where the humans had somehow bypassed the security systems. Hannah activated a communication device. "Extraction team ready. 4 to transport." Sue felt a strange tingling sensation, and suddenly they were no longer in the Exilarian facility, but aboard a human ship. The transition had happened so quickly that Sue momentarily lost her balance. "Welcome to the Swift Justice," Hannah said. "We need to move fast. Our intelligence suggests the weapon will be ready for deployment within 48 hours. Admiral Tai was waiting for them in the ship's command center. His expression was guarded as he regarded the Xilarian commander. "You're taking a significant risk by helping us," he said to Sue. "Why?" Sue straightened to her full height. "Because some prices are too high to pay for victory. My ancestors chose genocide once. I won't let it happen again." Ta nodded slowly. "We'll need everything you know about the facility's defenses and the weapon itself." For the next several hours, Sue worked with the human tactical team, providing detailed information about Xilarian defense systems, patrol patterns, and the final solution's technical specifications. The more she worked with the humans, the more she realized how different they were from the monsters described in Xilarian propaganda. They were determined but not cruel, efficient but not without compassion. They fought with the clarity of purpose that came from defending their right to exist. As they prepared for the mission to disable the superweapon, Sue found herself standing next to Commander Hannah in the ship's observation deck. Through the viewport, they could see the stars visible from both human and Xilarian worlds. "If we succeed," Sue said quietly, "what happens next? Your people have good reason to hate mine." Hannah was silent for a moment before responding. "Hatred is easy. Rebuilding is hard. But our admiral has been clear from the beginning. This isn't just about vengeance. It's about creating a future where genocide can't happen again, to any species. Do you believe that's possible? Sue asked. I have to, Hannah replied. Otherwise, what are we fighting for? The Swift Justice engaged its phase shift drive, disappearing from normal space as it set course for Xilara IV and the most important mission of the war, a mission that would determine not just the fate of the conflict, but whether history would repeat its darkest chapters. The combined human-Novan fleet surrounded Xilara Prime, the Xilarian homeworld. 10,000 ships formed a perfect sphere around the blue-green planet, their weapons systems ready but not yet activated. After 2 years of war, the moment of truth had arrived. Admiral Ta stood on the bridge of the Vindication, his weathered face solemn as he studied the world on the main viewscreen. Xilara Prime was beautiful, oceans and continents under swirling cloud patterns, remarkably similar to the old images of Earth that humans had preserved for 2 centuries. All ships report ready, Admiral, Commander June announced. Weapon systems locked on primary targets. Ta nodded but remained silent. This was the most significant decision of his life, whether to destroy the civilization that had nearly eradicated humanity or to forge a different path. 3 days earlier, a strike team led by Commander June had successfully infiltrated the final solution control facility on Xilara IV's third moon. With Commander Sue's help, they had disabled the superweapon before it could be deployed against human-controlled worlds. The mission had been a complete success, with minimal casualties on either side. Now the Xilarian military was in disarray. Their superweapon was neutralized, their fleets scattered or surrendered, and their homeworld surrounded. Videos of the original historical records that Sue had discovered had been broadcast throughout Xilarian space, revealing the truth about the war against humanity. We have them at our mercy, Commander Hannah pointed out, standing beside Ta. We could end them as they tried to end us. Many in the human fleet wanted exactly that, complete retribution for what had been done to Earth and the colonies. After 2 centuries of exile, after generations born on ships instead of planets, the desire for vengeance ran deep. Tai stared at the blue-green world on the viewscreen, so reminiscent of old images of Earth. If we destroy them completely, how are we different from them? He asked quietly. Our vengeance is justified, but it cannot be limitless. He turned to face the bridge crew, his decision made. Open a channel to the surface. I want to speak with whoever is in charge down there. The communication officer worked at her console. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the capital city. It's Commander Sue. Sue's face appeared on the viewscreen. Behind her stood several other Xilarians, their postures tense but determined. Admiral Tide. Sue began. High Commander Dohan has been removed from power. I represent the provisional government of Xilara. A murmur of surprise passed through the bridge. Explain, Tai requested simply. After the truth about our history was revealed, many of our military commanders refused to continue fighting. Dohan attempted to launch unsanctioned attacks against civilian targets. He was arrested by his own security detail. Sue's compound eyes seemed to reflect a complex mix of emotions, unfamiliar in a Xilarian face. We request terms for surrender. Tai studied her for a long moment. The terms are simple. The Xilarian collective will be dissolved. All occupied worlds will be granted independence. War reparations will be paid to the human survivors and all other species who suffered under Xilarian rule. Sue and the other Xilarians conferred briefly before she replied. We accept these terms. We also offer something more, access to our terraforming technology. It cannot restore Earth completely, but it might help heal some of the damage our ancestors caused. The surrender ceremony took place on neutral ground, a space station at the edge of the Xilarian system. Commander Sue signed the documents on behalf of her people, formally ending 2 centuries of conflict. The peace negotiations that followed were tense but productive. Diplomats from dozens of species worked together to create a new framework for interstellar relations. The Exilarian Collective was officially dissolved, replaced by an alliance of equals that included the former Exilarian worlds, the Novan Confederation, and humanity. Not all humans were satisfied with the outcome. Many had hoped for more complete revenge against the species that had nearly destroyed them, but Admiral Tai held firm. "We didn't survive for 200 years just to become what we hated," he told his officers. "Our ancestors preserved not just our genetic code, but our values as well. We honor them best by building something better than what was destroyed." 1 year later, Admiral Ta stood on the observation deck of the Resilience once more. The ship that had been humanity's flagship during their exile now served as a monument and museum, permanently docked at the new Central Alliance station. Commander Hanna joined him at the viewport, along with representatives from a dozen different species, Novans, reformed Exilarians, and others who had joined the Alliance. Together, they watched as ships from various worlds moved peacefully through space, cooperation replacing conflict. "We've received the survey results from the Sol system," Hanna told him quietly, handing him a data tablet. "Earth is still there, still recovering from what was done to it. The Exilarian terraforming technology is making a difference. The atmospheric radiation has decreased by 15% already." Tai studied the images of Earth, still scared and damaged, but showing the first signs of recovery. Patches of green were visible in areas that had been barren for centuries. "The scientists estimate it will take 50 years before humans can start to resettle limited areas," Hanna continued. 100 years before large-scale return is possible." "A long time," Ta mused. "But not as long as we've already waited," Hanna replied. Ta nodded, looking up from the tablet to the large star map displayed across the observation deck. It showed the territories of the new alliance, hundreds of worlds working together, learning from the mistakes of the past. "Humanity returned with vengeance in our hearts," he said thoughtfully, "but we've accomplished something greater than revenge. We've created a future where no species will face extinction at the hands of another." He activated a control panel, and a hologram appeared in the center of the deck, a slowly rotating image of Earth, damaged but healing. "We'll go home someday," Ta said to the assembled representatives. "But first, we'll make sure that what happened to us never happens again." Director Mena of the Novan Confederation stepped forward. "The Alliance has approved your proposal, Admiral. The Earth Restoration Project will begin immediately, with contributions from all member worlds." Commander Su, now serving as the Exilarian representative to the Alliance, added, "And the historical archives from all our worlds will be combined into a single repository. No one will be able to hide truth or rewrite history again." As the meeting concluded and the representatives departed, Hanna remained with Admiral Tai at the viewport. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when we launched our first attack?" she asked him. "No," he admitted. "I thought only of striking back, of showing them we had survived." "From ghosts to guardians," Hanna said with a slight smile. "From exiles to exemplars," Tai agreed, his weathered face relaxed for perhaps the first time in decades. Together, they looked toward the stars visible through the viewport, stars no longer filled with enemies but with possibilities. Humanity had returned not just to reclaim their place in the galaxy, but to ensure a better future for all. In a small garden area aboard the Central Alliance station, a section had been set aside for plants from each member world. At its center stood a simple glass case containing a small plant with green leaves and red petals, a rose, descended from the last flowers to leave Earth 2 centuries ago. Beneath it, a small plaque bore an inscription in multiple languages. "We remember, never again." The end.